Hello and welcome everyone, I'm Ari Lax, and this week I'm going to be bringing you some more modern aggro. So last week I took a look at Bushwhacker Zoo, which is kind of all the way on one end of the spectrum. That's your hyper aggro deck. I described it as basically trying to be infect, but a little less resilient, or a little more resilient to removal, a little more resilient to like answers and stuff like that, and that your Wild Nacatl can just kill them in a way that a Glistener Elf chipping away for one infected turn isn't going to do. This deck's kind of on the other end of the spectrum. I don't know if these decks are the best position, but this is kind of big aggro. So the idea is that unlike the Bushwhacker deck, your opponent's going to play Restoration Angel and it's not going to do anything. You know, their creatures, their light removal is not going to do a lot of work against you. They really need to have specific answers, a lot of answers to win, or go way under you, which admittedly I think people are somewhat trying to do now, which is why I don't think this is the best position deck, but it's worth taking a look at what the low end of this deck is, because I think it's really powerful. I think that the engine, the shell at least, is really powerful. It's the kind of deck that's going to stick around and be like a real tier 1 contender in the format. This deck is Bant Eldrazi. So this deck was, I believe, the first major finish that I remember seeing out of it. I mean, it had been played before, but Todd Stevens top 16, a open on the SCG tour with it, I want to say in late April or early May. Then to follow that up, my team East West Bowl played it at Grand Prix Charlotte and Grand Prix LA, resulting in, I believe, Ben Freeman and Alex Magelton both lost their win-and-ins at Grand Prix Charlotte, but Pascal Maynard finished in third or fourth place at Grand Prix LA. Just generally, this deck's using the same powerful Eldrazi shell that we are used to seeing alongside Eldrazi Temple. And it just gets to play all the good cards across all the colors because your other accelerant is Noble Hierarch, which does the fixing for you. This specific list was played to a Modern Super IQ win in San Diego by Dan Besterman. And I chose this list because I was interested in playing with this 3-drop split between Matter Reshaper and Eldrazi Sky Spawner and seeing how that went. So I don't like maxing out on Eldrazi Sky Spawner because I think it taxes your mana a little too much, but the card is obviously very powerful. Matter Reshaper is also good in a lot of spots, but also just a generally weaker card. So I'm interested in seeing how that goes. Kind of go through the creature base. We've got Reality Smasher and Thought-Knot Seer as the obvious threats. Drowner Folk to top the curve and trump mid-range-ish mirrors. Reshaper and Sky Spawner to bridge the gap and let you play turn 2 Eldrazi. Displacer as basically just the best card. One of the best new creatures in every format, really. It's trumping all sorts of fair matchups in Vintage, Legacy, Standard, Modern, just everything. You've got some Tarmogoyfs to fill in the curve, just as like a big idiot. Thalia is another option, but I like the just large creature option right now. You've got Ancient Stirrings as your fixing. It's your Virtual Ponder. It finds you, temples, Eldrazi, whatever you want. Path to Exile is the best answer. And Stubborn Denial as some form of interaction against the degenerate decks beyond just casting Thought-Knots here. Without 8 Eldrazi Temple plus Iovugan, you're no longer able to brute force your way through some of the combo decks the way old Eldrazi was able to. So something like this is much more important. Looking at the mana, you have Noble Hierarch and slightly less lands than previous Eldrazi decks, if I remember correctly. They're closer to 25, 26. Noble Hierarch lets you cheat on that and also ramp to Eldrazi. Lots of Cavernous Souls because you are playing blue and white Eldrazi and also need colorless mana. Eldrazi Temples, a bunch of Pain Lands, and a Gavany Township because this card's just great. Just looking through, these are all the colorless lands. You have 14 sources, which is enough. One more wouldn't hurt, but I don't know if you can fit it. And then moving to the Fetch Duel part of the mana base. All the Fetch Duels you could want. 2 forests because you are heavier on green with Noble Hierarch and Ancient Stirrings on 1. Windswept Heaths, again, you want a green fetch for painless mana on turn 1. Then a Plains. I believe the reason for the Plains is that you actually could play like Misty Rainforest on an island, but the blue spells you're trying to cast are Eldrazi that you cast off Cavern, whereas the white spells you're trying to cast are Path to Exile and sideboard cards, which makes the Plains more important because you can fetch a painless land on turn 2. Looking at the sideboard, we've got Stony Silence's Affinity Hate, slightly lower than you probably need to be to really beat them here, but at the same time, Affinity is really on the down low. You got some timely reinforcements to beat burn and aggro. Same with Spellskite, that also does double duty against Infect and Bogles and similar decks. You've got Grafdigger's Cage to beat Malira, which was a bad matchup for old Eldrazi and is a atrocious matchup for this deck because you're not as fast. Some negates to back up your Stubborn Denial against generic combo. Celestial Purge is just a generally good flexible removal spell that takes care of a lot of random stuff. Blood Moon, Jeskai Ascendancy, just random cards. Engineer Explosives to sweep aggro decks and again kill random permanents. And then a Dismember as another spot removal spell against bigger creatures. Again, not a lot of fancy going on the sideboard, just the powerful good cards that you get because you are a white deck that also gets to play artifacts and blue cards. Yeah, so really the highlight of this deck is that you get to play the best threats and have flexible enough mana to play real spells. And what I'm trying to figure out tonight is I want to see how these middling slots do. The Matter Reshapers, the Sky Spawners, the Tarmogoyfs, and the Stubborn Denials, because I think the rest of the deck's pretty locked in, maybe besides like the last Drowner of Hope or two in certain metagames. And also just kind of see, I think the meta is not super friendly to this deck right now. I kind of want to know what the low-end cap on this deck is, because if this is the low-end cap, this is the kind of deck where you get a lot of value out of... So, unlike Teamer or something, you can't really guess too far off with your list, but you get a lot of value out of going through the reps and knowing the sideboard cards. So this deck can do well at its worst. You're actually going to get a lot of value by attaching yourself to an Eldrazi deck, putting in the reps, and knowing how to, play whatever with it, because if you just don't have the metagame breaking deck, it'll be a good choice.